The Women's National Basketball Association has reached a breaking point. What began as a controversial on-court incident has escalated into a full-scale organizational crisis that threatens the very foundation of professional women's basketball. When Sophie Cunningham took to the microphone and issued what many interpreted as physical threats against Alyssa Thomas, she didn't just speak as an individual player, she became the voice of an entire league's frustration. Behind closed doors, emergency board meetings are being called. Corporate sponsors are threatening to withdraw funding. Legal teams are working overtime. And at the center of this maelstrom stands Caitlyn Clark, the generational talent whose safety has become the flashpoint for a deeper conversation about player protection, league governance, and whether the WNBA's leadership has completely lost control of its own sport. The explosion we're witnessing didn't happen overnight. It's the culmination of months of escalating tension, simmering resentment, and what many observers believe is a systematic targeting of one of the league's brightest young stars. During a recent game, Alyssa Thomas delivered a hit to Caitlyn Clark that went far beyond the boundaries of acceptable physical play. What was initially called as a common foul would later be upgraded to a flagrant 2 violation, the league's way of admitting they got it wrong the first time. But the damage was already done. According to reports, Clark suffered a back injury during the collision, the kind of injury that affects guards who depend on explosive movement and rapid directional changes. This wasn't a minor bruise or a fleeting moment of pain. Medical professionals were concerned enough to pull her from full practice and keep her indefinitely sidelined. The physical toll was real, measurable, and documented by team physicians. What made the situation exponentially worse, however, was what happened next. Instead of showing remorse or acknowledging the severity of her actions, Thomas held a press conference where she downplayed the entire incident. She characterized her flagrant foul as normal basketball play. She suggested that Clark was exaggerating the situation to draw referee attention. She essentially gaslighted the public, her league, and the basketball community at large. This wasn't just a player defending her actions. This was a veteran seemingly mocking the very concept that her conduct had caused harm. For teammates like Sophie Cunningham who watched this unfold in real time, something inside snapped. Sophie Cunningham's response wasn't calculated. It wasn't PR tested or approved by team management. It was raw, emotional, and utterly unfiltered. When she learned that Thomas had minimized the incident and that Clark's injury might sideline her from upcoming games, Cunningham went live on air and absolutely unloaded. According to eyewitness accounts, Cunningham's emotional breakdown was so intense that security personnel had to physically intervene. She called Thomas an absolute disgrace to the sport. She screamed that you cannot assault a generational superstar, potentially injure her, and then parade yourself as a victim on national television. She pointed directly at the camera and issued what many interpreted as a direct threat, essentially stating that if Clark's injury kept her out of games, Thomas would face consequences of a completely different nature. This wasn't just angry teammate solidarity. This was a line being drawn in the sand. This was a player saying, out loud and on camera, that if the league wouldn't protect its most valuable asset, the players themselves would take matters into their own hands. The implications of that statement cannot be overstated. In professional sports, such declarations have historically preceded escalations in violence, organizational instability, and sometimes worse. The WNBA front office suddenly realized they weren't dealing with an isolated incident anymore. They were dealing with a potential mutiny, a breakdown in locker room discipline that could spread throughout the entire league. What makes this situation particularly explosive is that this isn't the first time Caitlyn Clark has been on the receiving end of aggressive, arguably illegal play. According to multiple sources, this type of incident happens every single game to Clark. League officials admit they see the footage. Referees have the opportunity to call the fouls in real time, and yet the pattern continues. This raises uncomfortable questions about whether there's an informal understanding among veteran players, a code of conduct that says, "This rookie is too much of a threat to our established positions and our league. She's drawing ratings. She's getting sponsorship deals. She's becoming the face of women's basketball. We need to send her a message physically." Some observers have suggested, carefully and cautiously, that there may be elements of jealousy at play. When the WNBA released a 30-year commemorative poster, Caitlyn Clark wasn't included. Other notable players were featured, but not the one player whose rookie season has already generated unprecedented interest in women's professional basketball. Teammates have openly questioned these decisions, pointing out that marketing decisions seem oddly disconnected from who actually moves the needle for ticket sales, viewership, and brand engagement. Whether it's jealousy, resentment, or something else entirely, there's clearly a pattern of the league's young superstar being treated differently than established veterans. She gets targeted on the court. She gets excluded from promotional materials. And when she speaks up about the treatment, there are whispers that she's being oversensitive or that she's somehow manufactured the controversy. Perhaps the most damaging element of this entire situation is how mainstream sports media initially handled it. When fans complained on social media about the physical treatment Clark was receiving, media outlets dismissed them as oversensitive. When analysts pointed out the dangerous patterns, league officials issued boilerplate statements about the physical nature of professional basketball. When injuries mounted, there were suggestions that maybe Clark was simply too fragile for professional play. This narrative, that if you get injured or if you speak up about dirty play, the problem is with you, not with the system, creates a permission structure for continued abuse. It tells younger players that they're expected to absorb punishment without complaint. It tells veterans that they can get away with things because the media will provide cover. Alyssa Thomas's press conference was a masterclass in gaslighting. She essentially told the world, "What you saw didn't happen the way you saw it. You're misinterpreting normal basketball, and she's the one with the problem for making a scene." This is textbook manipulation, a way of getting the public to doubt their own eyes and their own sense of what's right and wrong. For Sophie Cunningham, watching this unfold was the final straw. She wasn't just defending a teammate at that point. She was defending the very concept of reality and accountability. What's becoming clear from reports inside the Phoenix Mercury organization is that this isn't just about one incident or one player. According to sources within the team, the Mercury as a whole is described as the unfriendliest group in the league this season. People who work for the organization apparently can't stand the team culture. The word rude keeps coming up. Unprofessional is mentioned repeatedly. Not friendly is how people describe the internal environment. This suggests that Sophie Cunningham's explosion wasn't happening in a vacuum. It was the culmination of a toxic environment that had been building all season long. When you combine an unfriendly locker room culture with the physical targeting of a star player, with gaslighting press conferences, with what appears to be league mismanagement, you create the perfect conditions for a complete organizational breakdown. The Mercury front office now faces a crisis in real time. They have a player who explicitly threatened consequences against another professional athlete, all on live television, all captured by millions of viewers. They have sponsors who are uncomfortable with the volatility. They have fans who are questioning whether the league can be trusted to protect its talent. They have legal teams that need to figure out what was actually said, whether it constitutes a genuine threat, and what the organization's liability might be. Behind the scenes, sponsors are in a state of absolute panic. These companies invested millions of dollars in the WNBA this season with the expectation of a certain brand experience. They wanted to be associated with thrilling basketball, athletic excellence, and the growth of women's sports. They did not invest to be associated with locker room threats, player-on-player aggression, and organizational chaos. Several major sponsors have apparently begun threatening to pull their funding if immediate, drastic disciplinary action isn't taken. This isn't just idle corporate posturing. In a league that's still building its financial foundation, losing major sponsorship money could impact everything from salary caps to facility improvements to marketing budgets. The WNBA Commissioner's Office is receiving calls from lawyers representing these corporations. They're being asked very direct questions. What are you going to do to restore order? What assurances can you give that this level of volatility won't continue? Are we safe investing our brand equity in this league? These aren't rhetorical questions. They're ultimatums with financial teeth. If Caitlyn Clark's back injury is severe and all available evidence suggests it is, then we're no longer talking about a sports controversy. We're talking about a potential career-altering injury that resulted from what appears to have been excessive force. The medical staff at the Indiana Fever knows this. They know that rushing her back to the floor too early risks causing permanent damage. They also know that ticket sales, television ratings, and sponsorship revenue all increase when Clark plays. This creates a humanitarian crisis disguised as a sports story. Do you keep a generational talent out of action to protect her long-term health? Or do you bring her back too early because the league's financial structure depends on her presence? This isn't a decision that should be made lightly or under pressure from corporate sponsors. The Fever's medical team has essentially put their foot down and said Clark needs to heal properly. By doing so, they've also made a statement. The league's financial interests are secondary to player safety. This is admirable from a healthcare perspective, but it's also creating urgency for the league office to respond with meaningful action against Thomas and others who have engaged in this pattern of aggressive play. There's an uncomfortable conversation emerging about how different players are treated by referees, by the media, and by league officials. If a veteran star receives the kind of physical treatment that Caitlyn Clark receives on a nightly basis, is the response the same? Would the league drag its feet on suspensions? Would the media minimize it as just physical basketball? The evidence suggests no. Star players have historically been protected. When they take hits that impair their play, there are immediate conversations about player safety. When they're involved in altercations, the league moves quickly on discipline. The standard seems to shift depending on who's involved. This isn't just unfair to younger players, it's corrosive to the league's integrity. If the rules are applied inconsistently based on seniority or status, then what are the rules actually for? What's the point of having a rulebook if it's optional? Sophie Cunningham's frustration, viewed through this lens, becomes less about an individual incident and more about systemic injustice. She's not just angry about one cheap shot, she's angry about a pattern of differential treatment that sends a clear message. Some players matter more than others. The moment Sophie Cunningham made her on-air statements, lawyers began taking notes. What exactly did she say? Could it be interpreted as a credible threat? Is the WNBA liable if anything happens to Alyssa Thomas? What's the players' union's position on this? The legal questions are almost endless. Did Cunningham cross a line from passionate advocacy into something that qualifies as criminal threatening? Can she be disciplined by the league for her statements? Can Thomas pursue civil action against Cunningham or the Mercury organization? Meanwhile, Thomas's lawyers are likely advising her to document everything. Every security concern, every moment of discomfort, every interaction that could be construed as harassment. If something happens, if there's a physical altercation, if she receives actual threats beyond what was said on air, the legal liability could be massive. The league's lawyers are running scenarios. They're considering how to respond to potential inquiries from law enforcement. They're thinking about insurance implications. They're trying to figure out how to contain a situation that's already spiraled beyond the bounds of normal sports controversy. What this entire situation reveals is a comprehensive failure of leadership at multiple levels. The league office failed to protect a star player from a pattern of aggressive play. The referees failed to call fouls consistently. The media failed to hold Thomas accountable until a player had to do it for them. The Mercury organization apparently failed to create a culture of professionalism and support. These aren't isolated failures. They're symptoms of an organization that's growing too fast, without adequate systems to manage conflict, without adequate leadership to set clear expectations, and without adequate commitment to the fundamental principle that player safety matters more than anything else. A well-managed sports organization sees patterns before they explode. A well-managed organization protects its talent. A well-managed organization has media protocols that prevent players from using press conferences to gaslight the public. A well-managed organization has cultural expectations that prevent entire locker rooms from becoming hostile environments. The WNBA is discovering in real time that it doesn't have these things yet. It has talent, it has fans, it has corporate interest, but it doesn't have the institutional infrastructure to manage a crisis when everything breaks down simultaneously. The commissioner's office faces a decision that will essentially define the rest of the season. Do they impose a multi-game suspension on Alyssa Thomas? Do they fine Sophie Cunningham for her statements? Do they launch an investigation into the pattern of targeting? Do they implement new protocols to protect star players? Do they make an example of someone to restore order? Whatever they choose will send a message about what the league actually values. If they go soft on Thomas, they're saying that the protocol for dealing with cheap shots and player safety concerns doesn't really matter. If they overly punish Cunningham, they're saying that defending teammates isn't acceptable. If they do nothing, they're saying the whole system is broken beyond repair. The pressure is immense. Sponsors are watching. Players are watching. Fans are watching. The media is watching. Everyone wants to know if the WNBA is serious about being a professional organization that protects its players and maintains competitive integrity, or if it's willing to tolerate chaos to keep established stars happy. The WNBA stands at an inflection point. What started as a controversial foul has exploded into a fundamental crisis about whether the league has the leadership, systems, and commitment to protect its talent and maintain integrity. Sophie Cunningham's emotional breakdown on live television wasn't just about defending Caitlyn Clark. It was a referendum on whether the entire organization is capable of doing what it says it values. The next 48 hours will likely determine whether the league emerges from this stronger, with clear policies and renewed commitment to fairness, or whether it continues its trajectory toward institutional dysfunction. The answer rests with how seriously the commissioner takes this moment and whether meaningful action follows. The WNBA's credibility depends on it.